Today we will go through both the history of pipelines in Canada and their economic impacts, technological advancements, impact on Indigenous communities, and finally we will recognize the regulatory and potential controversies that come along with the development of pipelines throughout Canada. Imagine a world without pipelines. No heating for our homes, no clean water for our sinks, and no gas to fill up our cars. Pipelines have become an essential role in Canada's economic growth. Thanks to technological advancements like GPS tracking and databases, we have come up with a safe and efficient way to monitor these pipelines in order to limit leaks as well as environmental disasters. This helps to mitigate public concern regarding safety of the pipelines. But this progress hasn't come without controversy, especially among Indigenous communities. For many Indigenous peoples, the land is sacred. The idea that Mother Earth cannot be replaced with a dollar is a core fundamental within their community. Pipeline development has often caused harm to these communities and land, which has led to rightful backlash that cannot be ignored in future development. While pipelines have helped Canada economically, they've also sparked serious ethical questions. How do we balance economic growth while also keeping in mind the impact on these Indigenous communities and the environment? Canada's history of resource development has shown us that progress should not come at the cost of justice or respect.
One of Canada's earliest pipeline projects actually started in the 1850s when fossil fuel was first discovered in Canada. But for a long time, pipeline expansion in Canada was quite slow. But things changed during the 1973 oil embargo when OPEC countries cut off oil exports to other countries due to political tension in the Middle East. Because there was a global oil shortage and a rapid inflation in the price of oil, it encouraged countries like Canada and the US to find ways to extract and process oil locally. The 1973 oil embargo was one of the key factors that led to the rapid expansion of pipelines in North America. Today, there are over 840,000 kilometers of pipelines across Canada, and they transport things like natural gas, crude oil, and other types of fossil fuel. But this progress didn't come easy, however. It was often met with intense opposition, whether it's due to economic concerns, environmental concerns, or simply questions around the feasibility of the projects. Even with those challenges, Canada continues to expand its pipeline infrastructure, mainly because of the economic benefits they bring. One big advantage is job creation. For example, Trans Mountain Expansion Project that runs from Edmonton, Alberta to Burnaby, British Columbia employed over 6,000 people, 600 of which were Indigenous workers. So more jobs mean less unemployment and stronger local economies. Another key advantage is that pipeline expansions help Canada become less reliant on foreign oil imports. By extracting and storing oil locally, we have more control on the supply of oil within the country. Additionally, a lot of pipeline projects usually involve revenue sharing agreements with Indigenous groups. This means that the economic benefits that come with pipeline expansions are shared with communities that are directly impacted.
Technological advancements in the pipeline and oil and gas industry has transformed efficiency, safety, and environmental impact over the past century. One of the biggest innovations has been the use of GNSS and GPS systems, which became more advanced in the 1990s. These technologies allow for better planning and environmental data collection before construction even begins. Another major development is the Smart Pipeline Inspection Gauge, or SmartPIG for short. Originally developed in the 1960s, SmartPIGs detect leaks, assess pipeline ovality, and provide real-time data to prevent failures. Maintaining pipeline integrity is critical, as deformation like ovalities can weaken the structure and increase the risk of corrosion. When weaknesses are found, integrity digs are performed to remove and replace damaged sections. Airborne LiDAR has also revolutionized pipeline surveying. Instead of relying solely on manual surveys, drones and aircrafts now use LiDAR technology to create detailed maps helping engineers identify potential obstacles and reduce environmental impact.
When talking about pipeline and the development process and the impact it had on Indigenous communities, it's kind of complicated to fine-tune and identify one specific perspective. So some projects like the NGTL Tower Bridge expansion showed real collaboration and where over 70 communities were consolidated. Traditional knowledge helped shape the overall project, and revenue sharing brought benefits back to the communities involved. Another example of something positive like this would be the Coastal GasLink pipeline, which included 25 agreements with elected indigenous leaders, which protected sites like berry picking, burial sites, and it also allowed for sharing profits, as talked about previously. But when it gets complicated is cases like the hereditary chiefs, which opposed projects, leading to protest and RCMP involvement, showing how indigenous voices aren't always heard equally. On like going back to the positive side, the pipeline project brought power to 16 different remote communities, reducing their diesel dependencies and kind of supporting self-sufficiency. Not every community sees all these changes as progress, like the Bad River Band, which were they were trying to stop the rerouting of Line 5 through their territory, showing how, environmental concerns and the right to say no for indigenous groups is still like a major issue that's prevalent in today's society. So I would say while technology advances and economic incentives help, they don't really fix every problem that indigenous groups have. So consent, cultural respect, and inclusion are very important in ensuring that cultural loss doesn't take place.
The development of pipelines in Canada highlights a deep intersection between economic ambition, technological innovation, and evolving regulatory and cultural landscapes. On one hand, projects like the Trans Mountain Expansion and Keystone XL have driven major economic gains through job creation, increased tax revenues, and regional growth, but they've also sparked environmental controversies and deepened public distrust. A powerful example is the opposition between the Wet'suwet'en Nation, who asserted both their ancestral land rights and concerns over environmental damage. Their resistance connects directly to legal milestones like the Hayden versus British Columbia, which established that free, prior, and informed consent from Indigenous communities must be central to any resource development. In response, companies have integrated advanced safeguards like real-time leak detection, corrosion-resistant materials, and GPS-based surveying to enhance safety, but these measures don't fully address the bigger ethical dilemma, continuing reliance on fossil fuels and lasting harm to ecosystem. Recognizing these complexities, regulators like Canada Energy Regulator and Alberta Energy Regulator are now shifting towards more balanced decision-making that puts environmental and cultural protection on an equal footing with economic goals. Ultimately, Canada's pipeline experience shows that real progress depends on transparent, inclusive systems, ones that protects Indigenous rights and prioritizes sustainable development without compromising cultural and ecological heritage.
Continuing on the progress that has been made through technological advancements, regulations, and the past cases, let's now go through how federal government's approach differs from the provincial ones on this matter regarding the regulations and law. So the Canadian federal government has been acting fast on finding a resolution to this matter. They adopted the United Nations Declarations on Rights of the Indigenous People. It's called UNDRIP, which later became law in 2021. So they have rolled out the action plan for 2023 to 2028, outline all of the steps that needed to strengthen the rights of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Although there are more work to be done on the federal government, I think this is a breakthrough on the effort to strengthen the inclusions of Indigenous communities. On the other hand, an opposite trend was observed from the Albertan governments. They have taken more aggressive actions. One clear example for this would be the signing of one of the major pipeline expansion project with Enbridge, which are supposed to double the production of oil and gas in Alberta to make us a greater player in the North American markets. During the signing process of this project, Alberta has failed to address all of the impact and giving adequate consultation to the Indigenous community, continuing to prioritize the economic interests. So finally, through this project, we have found that pipelines has the ability to thrive in a society where there's a balance between ethical regulations, respectful relationships with the indigenous communities, its benefits, and also its environmental impacts, especially in the safeguards such as LiDAR to limiting the spill risk. And also, indigenous communities has been facilitating the discussions and future directions on these pipelines, which is evident in the cancellation of the Keystone Pipeline project. Although there are more work to be done, we believe that positive progress that has been made to resolve this matter.